The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is Music Weekly once again on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. Special early start time, 5 p.m. Eastern time tonight, because there is an NXT Premium Live event coming up in a couple hours that we're going to sit down and enjoy. I will be sending out some tweets as I did last night, but no podcast tonight after that NXT event. But we are bringing you our weekly look at the best rock and metal releases. And of course, this one, we are taking a look at the releases of June the 21st. I couldn't remember what date that was there for a second, but we do have some news headlines to go over before we get to that. And before we get to that, I will introduce, as always, in the studio, it's Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It is going.
Oh, let's try that again. Let's try unmuted this time. Mike, how's it going?
I think it's going all right now that I can hear myself through these speakers. Yeah, interesting week. A lot of different music. Looking forward to getting into it.
It was maybe not as much great music this week, but the variety of types of music was just off the charts this week. It's just stuff from all kinds of different corners of music. So it's going to be a very interesting week. I think there'll be something for everybody on this list, and maybe some things that are outside of what we normally feature on this podcast that people will check out. Of course, Mike will have his playlist that we'll share in the chat. And of course, if you're watching on the YouTube VOD, we'll have a card pop up. When he shares it in the chat, that'll also pop up on the YouTube video. If you're listening on the podcast version, you're going to just need to come to our Twitch page. And while you're there, drop us a follow. We would really appreciate that. We're going to get to some news headlines. Nothing really heavy this week in the news, but just a couple of news stories we kind of want to mention in passing. And there is that playlist, as mentioned, dropping in there. But a couple of Megadeth-related news stories. Kind of the bigger one of the two was James Lomenzo confirming that Megadeth is working on new music. Of course, they last released an album back in 2022 with The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead. And now it looks like maybe we're going to get another new Megadeth album. I don't know if it'll be later this year or maybe in 2025, as we're already halfway through the year. But just kind of excited to see what this new music is going to sound like, because we've got a new guitarist we're going to talk about here in a minute. And it's a band that, even though they always sound like Megadeth, they are always kind of evolving in different ways as they have different musicians in the group. And of course, I know as our resident Megadeth expert, I know you'll have some thoughts on that. So kind of your thoughts on them getting back in the studio and getting some new music going.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to hear what Timu brings to the formula. Kiko's a great guitarist, and it's unfortunate to see him go, but by all accounts, this guy is certainly the real deal too. And I'm not really familiar with his work prior to Megadeth. I know he was really highly touted kind of coming into it. You always kind of wonder, because I think Megadeth has had a tradition of just outstanding guitarists, whether it was Kiko, Chris Broderick, Chris Poland, Marty Friedman, obviously, just tremendous players. And it'll also be interesting to see, I mean, the last Megadeth album, we had the cameo from Ice-T in one of the songs, so you just kind of wonder what Dave has up his sleeve, trying to maybe check off some boxes of people that maybe he wants to work with on whatever albums he has left in his career.
Yeah, and I think, they've reached the point where he can pretty much, if people are interested, he can pretty much get whoever he wants. The other thing we could see, because we've seen it in some live shows, is potentially some of those previous guitarists coming back in for cameos here and there, because obviously they've done a little bit of that on concert tours. The new guitarist, Timu Mantasari, there's a really good piece on him, and I'll share that in the chat, that's on Blabbermouth, kind of a feature piece on him, talking about his influences, talking about kind of learning the different styles of Megadeth guitarists, because that is the big challenge when you're stepping into such a legendary band, is you've got this entire back catalog that you've got to not only learn but master, because the fans that show up at these live shows, the one thing Megadeth is known for, at least in my opinion, is their live shows. They are amazing.
Yeah.
Their pressure is kind of there to, like, hey, you've got to be able to come in and kind of nail all that old stuff that you never played, or maybe just played as a musician just for fun. Now you're going to have to do it in concert live, and that's got to be intimidating. But it seems like the guys that Dave Mustaine gets, like, they just eat this challenge up, like, oh, cool, I can do that. Let's take this on and make it my own. And I'm sure this guy's not going to be any different.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to your point about just learning the other guitarists' work and kind of absorbing that. I mean, you had Chris Poland, who was like a jazz fusion player. You had someone like Marty Friedman, who's just this virtuoso guitarist, but more kind of like feel-oriented. Not, you're not really hearing him do jazz or neoclassical type stuff. You have Chris Broderick, who he is more kind of that modern metal / neoclassical. Like, you can look online and find videos of him playing like nylon string guitars, just busting out just the most ridiculous things. And, all these guys had different styles, and it would be really cool to kind of, as a guitarist, dive into that and kind of see, okay, this guitarist decided to do this here. That's interesting. I would have done that. Really cool, and it'll be interesting to see kind of what this guy does with his own autonomy to make his own decisions in the band.
Well, and that's the point I was going to make. And I think if you're a fan of Megadeth or metal in general, you should definitely check out that feature piece on Blabbermouth. It was really well done. Kind of goes through him learning the different styles. But the one thing he made clear, and it was kind of the headline of the story, is that Dave Mustaine has given him that autonomy, as you mentioned, to kind of put his own signature, his own stamp on it, because and talked about some of these virtuosos that Dave brings into the band. Like, he knows they're coming in with some sort of gift or talent or the way they do things, and that's the reason he's bringing them in. He's not bringing them in to say, okay, now I'm going to put you in this box. I want to see what kind of craziness you can come up with that then fits in with what Megadeth is, and create this thing that maybe nobody's ever heard before. And it makes you excited for new music, because it just seems like everything they just continue to do is just building on their legacy. It's not in any way, you don't think, man, they should have hung it up 5 years ago. Like, it just feels like they're continuing to push it forward.
It's kind of funny, because I felt like this article was a direct response to a Chris Broderick story that Blabbermouth had back in June, with the headline, Chris Broderick says he has more artistic freedom in Flames than he did in Megadeth, which, granted, that's probably going to be true. At the end of the day, Megadeth is Dave Mustaine's band. I can't help but think that he has mellowed out a bit compared to when Broderick would have taken over, which would have been in the mid-2000s.
Yeah.
To hear him talk about even just kind of getting back together with Marty and playing live, it just, the way he talks about that, and the way he talks about Kiko having to leave the band to be with his family, it's just, when you read it, you don't think that's Dave Mustaine. It just seems like some chill old guy, and that's really never been his thing. So I definitely can imagine joining Megadeth in 2024 is a bit different than joining 20 years ago.
No question. But if you've never seen Megadeth live, you're a metal fan, you absolutely need to. I've been to maybe a handful. I know you've been to more than I have, but I've never seen them put on a bad show. Like, it is always, you just walk away. The only thing that's always disappointing is there's a few songs like, man, I wish I would have played this one or this one, because they have such an amazing catalog of hits that there's no way to get through them all. But like, whatever they end up playing, it's always great. So
I think one of the most interesting times I saw them, I want to say it was in 2000, and for some reason, which doesn't make any sense looking back on it, they had this co-headlining tour. It was them and Motley Crue, called, I think, Maximum Rock or something like that. But when I saw them, they performed before Motley Crue, and just the difference between those two sets was just stark. You had Megadeth, who was basically just kind of bare bones out there playing their songs and rocking. After that, you had the most like elaborate stage setup for Motley Crue and all the pyro and lighting. It was just, these were two bands that, despite having been around similar time frames, had vastly different mission statements, but it was a good show, just totally mismatch.
yeah, and it's funny you say that, because that's a good segue into one of our other stories we want to talk about. And it's this news about Motley Crue, and kind of following in the footsteps of a previous announcement by Kiss, talking about how they're kind of okay with their music continuing on after they've retired using AI, which we had a story about that last week or the week before. Motley Crue, Nikki Sixx specifically, doing this interview with Metal Injection, basically saying, actually it was originally with a Swedish radio station that Metal Injection wrote a story on, talking about how they're completely okay with it. I think they've drawn some criticism for their new music video, Dogs of War, because of heavy AI usage in it. And the comment in the headline, when the time is right, put us in a coffin and fire up those avatars, basically saying. Now, Kiss, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, they have never missed an opportunity to make a buck, and I would assume that would just extend past their lifetime, that they would just continue to try to make money. This is interesting because, again, that kind of goes back to the things we talked about with AI and music and what that's going to look like and what it's going to sound like. And it's just, first off, you could argue that maybe Motley Crue could have benefited from this technology 10 or 15 years ago. But secondly, at what point is it almost false advertising that it's like, it's just a computer now? This isn't Motley Crue. There's no heart and soul of the band in there anymore. It's just the sounds, and it's just not music. It's just, I mean, it is music, but it's just not. Like,
it's a facsimile of music.
Yeah.
It's not the genuine article. And it's kind of funny because I think Nikki Sixx is a guy who's taken a lot of criticism over the years for potentially not actually playing bass like live or even in the studio. So it's kind of funny that he would be totally okay with this. I can't confirm any of that.
Sure.
But to me, it feels like such an ego move. Like, if I'm a member of a band and I were to die, it'd be like, I want you guys to replace me with AI me instead of finding someone else to fill my spot. I'd rather fake me be the one performing than a real person who isn't me. I just, at some point, I think as fans, you have to put your foot down and say, this is so inauthentic. I can't get on board with this.
And we talk every week about all these bands that, in most cases, are not very widespread. Their reach is very limited, and yet we're getting a chance to check out their music, and it's awesome. But what you're saying, or what some people are saying, is they would rather have AI Motley Crue or AI Kiss continue to tour and produce music
than going out and seeing like Rivet Skull or something, like a legit band that are tearing it up.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating. I just think, if I was getting up there in age and Northern Kentucky came to me and said, we're going to use your voice sample to broadcast games without you being there, I'd be pretty upset about that. But at the same time, and I know we're jumping kind of all over the place, but I saw a story in front of our anime topic talking about some subtitles that are clearly machine-generated subtitles, and I saw a few examples, and they're really, really bad, and it's just total mistranslations, or sometimes not even translated at all. And it's just, at some point, quality work still has to be rewarded. I understand that at some point, computers will take over certain jobs. They have been for years. But if the output is bad, we can't be doing this. And there are just some things that it's like, when Motley Crue dies, they just need to die.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, you can't have birth without death. It's a duplicitous edge. Like, somebody else is going to be there to take that spot.
The problem is, and kind of going to your point about broadcasting, is once we decide, hey, we're okay with AI broadcasting, why wouldn't we just take our favorite broadcaster and have them do every sporting event for every college, for every pro team? All you need is one voice. Like, no one's getting rich that way besides the one person providing that voice.
Well, and I know we don't talk about sports on this podcast, but talking about this made me think that that's the big story that came out a few weeks ago, is that NBC has announced that they're going to use AI Al Michaels to do like highlight clips and like reels from the Olympics this summer. And, Al Michaels obviously signed off on this, but it's like, Al Michaels is still alive. I understand maybe he doesn't have his fastball anymore, but that dude's a legend and an Olympics legend. You wouldn't just hire him or put him in a studio somewhere to voice over these highlights? Like,
has ESPN announced a similar thing with Chris Berman yet? Because I think that's coming, right?
Sure, I would think so.
Just like NFL Countdown or whatever it is.
Like, either decide that Al Michaels can't do it anymore and let him retire gracefully or reduce his schedule, or hire the dude, pay him his money and bring him in and actually have him voice it over. It's just like, come on, guys, like, this is ridiculous. But I feel like these are the kind of discussions we're going to have in the music space and the anime space, and it's going to overlap all of our topics at some point, and it's such a messy topic in the end.
It is, and I think it's just another thing that is going against the young talented hard worker that wants to get out in whatever industry they want to get into, and they keep running into these different roadblocks. This is just another one.
It is, and it's kind of scary, honestly. But well, again, it's a story that's going to come up. We'll be doing news stories on it as we go. So it's just kind of the nature of the beast, as they say. Just a quick one more news story, and I'll just get a quick thought from you on it, just because I know this is a band that you have spotlighted before. According to a story that was published in Blabbermouth, but came from an interview with Total Rock, Danny Filth announcing the new Cradle of Filth album is finished. Looks like a new single will come out in the beginning of October prior to their European tour. They're thinking maybe February or March of 2025 for the album release. But like I said, I know that's a group that you've listened to over the years. Kind of your just quick thoughts on new Cradle of Filth.
Yeah, I'm always interested in hearing more Cradle of Filth. I kind of just glanced at this article, and I totally missed the second paragraph. This past May, Filth told Australia's Heavy about the progress of the recording sessions for the band's follow-up to 2021's Existence is Futile. Quote, "We've already done our track with Ed Sheeran." Did Cradle of Filth really do a collaboration with Ed Sheeran? Because I had no idea.
And evidently he's a Cradle of Filth fan, according to the article.
Yeah,
so.
that is certainly something I need to check out. I'm not an Ed Sheeran fan, but it sounds too ridiculous to not look into.
That is kind of interesting. So definitely worth looking into. And obviously we're all excited for more Cradle of Filth. So that'll be interesting. Again, we'll keep an eye on that. And obviously when that album comes up, presuming we're still doing this podcast in 2025, which at this point, why not? We'll at least give it a listen and see if it's something we want to spotlight on this program.
Yeah, evidently that's really a thing. That's amazing.
Well, you'll have to check that out. And next week you can report back and let us know how the Cradle of Filth Ed Sheeran collaboration is. So definitely check that out. And our listeners can check that out as well. So that kind of wraps up our news stuff for this week. So it's time to get to the new music stuff. And this was a wild week in music. This is... Again, not necessarily, I don't want to say it's not a strong week because I don't want to make it sound like these four bands that we're spotlighting are bad. They're phenomenal. I think the amount of great releases this week was down a little bit from previous weeks, but the variety and the styles of music that showed up this week that were high quality were really all over the musical spectrum in a way that I don't think we've had a week quite like this. And I think when people see these four picks, I think they're going to see songs that maybe aren't the song types or the album types that we typically pick. They're very much, I think, outside the box.
Yeah, it's funny when I'm going through this list each week. I'm just demoing each video because I pull them and don't really listen to them when I pull them. But as I go through them one by one, I have my little spreadsheet with all the artists and albums, and I'm just coloring them different colors based on whether I think they're worthwhile. And man, there was just so much red on this list. It just back to back to back to back to back. I'm like, man, you got to be kidding me. So then, speaking on the variety, I would run into something, and I'm just like, wait, what the hell is this? How did this even end up on the list? This doesn't seem like anything that I normally run into based on the list that I throw together from these websites. But it blew my mind, and the two things I picked are just so different, but so enjoyable. I've listened to them numerous times over the course of the week. Moving into my first pick, is the fourth album from the synthwave symphonic rock band. They are from Greece. The band is called Floating Worlds, and the album is Skywatcher.
Yeah, I have gotten a chance to listen to about half of each of the albums that you picked, and I'll copy the YouTube music link for both in the chat as we go. But I really, really enjoyed this. Chris, totally on board with synthwave.
Oh, it's incredible.
But honestly,
wow,
both of these groups and kind of this first one, it's hard to label exactly what they do because they do so many different things. But this first one, it's really good stuff. Talk about it.
Yeah, it's funny. When picking what tracks to demo for both of these, I had a difficult time because I was like, I like so many of these songs, but I don't know if any of them really fully encapsulate the sound of these bands. There's something missing in each track because they're so varied. So this band, Floating Worlds, they got together back in 1998, and according to their Bandcamp, after a lot of failed attempts to record their first song, they released their first album in 2007. And it's kind of interesting because I feel like we've encountered that before with other bands where maybe they started years ago, and maybe they released a little bit, maybe they didn't, but years later they're finally kind of up and running, and it's just kind of a cool reminder to keep at it because you'll eventually get there. Members of the band, we have John Sodi on vocals, Andreas V on guitars, synths and drum programming, and Mike Papadopoulos on bass guitar and guitars, with the drums being performed by Stelios Pavlo. It's another commonality between these two bands I picked is the songs that I picked for the playlist. I don't think totally did them justice. And this one, the one I have on the playlist, is In the Dark, which is a really good song, but man, it starts out really slowly. So it caught my attention just because it sounded so different than a lot of the stuff I wasn't really a fan of going through the list. But and once I got into the main part of the song, I'm like, yeah, this is something I need to get into. After hearing that and then checking into the band, I come to find out this is a concept album about the famous journalist Paul Rogers, telling the story of a case he reported on in the past about the disappearance of a 9-year-old boy who had hoped to meet his lost father on a distant star by observing the sky through a telescope. So, yeah, it's...
I'm all about concept albums, always.
Absolutely. This one is just... It's certainly out there, and it's... I enjoyed the music whether I got into the story or not. It's just so well done. The band stated that they had to explore music oceans to try to achieve the vibe of the band's favorite science fiction movies of the 80s and 90s, and I think they totally nail it. Kind of going through the album, you start with a song like Strange Kid, who has this really like groovy sound to it. Starlight Wish feels very 80s pop. Then you have the next song, Parade, which the beginning of it, to me, it sounds like what would happen if Richard Marx tried to cover Nativity in Black. It's totally unexpected. Let's see. Then we have Nostalgic Alleys, which kind of feels like maybe a slower Duran Duran song. Like, it's just really cool. And by the end of the album, you get Extraterrestrial, which is a 5.5-minute instrumental, which kind of feels like it would be the main theme to this movie that they're creating through this album. It's just so cool overall. Standout tracks, we're talking Strange Kid, Starlight Wish, Parade, Ignorance Goodbye, In the Dark, Skywatcher. The song I picked out here is Ignorance Goodbye. Really, really cool. Everything. Just check it out.
Yeah, what I've gotten to listen to of this album I really enjoyed, and we're going to get a chance to listen to a little bit of it now. Again, this is Floating Worlds off the album Skywatcher. The track is Ignorance Goodbye. So let's check out a little bit of that now right here on the Nerdcast Empire.
Extraterrestrial civilizations, radio single trace while scanning frequencies. Despite a failed attempts to get us fed alive, his dream to reach the stars would never ever die. High, up into the sky, scientific observations, signs of failure. Time, a universal lie, a mind cast endless questions.
Yeah, we can obviously listen to more of that, but I mean, that's just really good stuff. Like I said, what I've heard of it so far is really excellent and an interesting style. It's just really very different, but somehow they've absolutely nailed it with this album.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really makes me want to check out their other albums because if they had to kind of do homework to generate the sound they wanted for this album, it really makes me wonder what the others sound like. If it's similar or if this is just totally out of left field for the band.
And just a reminder, if you're listening on the podcast version of this, of course, you're not getting the music tracks. You got to check out the VOD, check us out live, or check out the YouTube VOD, assuming YouTube lets stuff get through. But again, the podcast version won't have those music tracks, but that's why you got to be here. That's why you got to check it out here on Twitch, because you definitely get to listen to some great stuff. And that was a really good first pick. You got two really good picks this week. Again, very different bands, but Both of them really excellent. What do you got for us next?
Yeah, so for my next pick, I like any band that their tags on Bandcamp are just limitless as far as how they describe their sound. I think you're always kind of in for something ridiculous when that happens. This is the latest album from the Illinois-based alternative doom, goth, grunge, horror, prog, hard rock band. The band is Vexing Hex, and this is their latest album, Solve et Coagula.
I knew we were in for something here when I opened up this on YouTube Music and just saw the track listing, because there's definitely some interesting track names here, and that always intrigues me. But it was, like I said, I've listened to about half of this album so far, and what I've heard of it is just really excellent stuff.
Yeah, again, another band that they don't sound like anything you ever hear, even if you're listening to what's popular amongst modern rock, which not that there's a lot of modern rock out there, but this is just a complete departure. So this band started originally in 2014. Before that, they were actually a punk band, the Haunts, back in the late aughts. But in 2014, in the haunted cornfields of Illinois, they got their start playing doom rock and occult pop. At that point in time, they were possessed by forces beyond this realm, which would explain the band member names on their Bandcamp. On lead vocals and guitar, we have Cadaverous, Lord of Dread. On bass and vocals, we have Haster, Lord of Madness. Guitar and vocals, we have Liminos, Lord of Illusions. On vocals and drums, we have Radament, Lord of Despairs. And finally, the keyboardist Viscera, Lord of Torment.
I love Viscera.
Yeah, I thought he had passed, but we got Big Daddy V coming back from the dead, Mabel, Men on a Mission, playing keyboards, which that's fair.
I love a band that just has a gimmick and they just live it. And I feel like that you can hear it in their music too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at first glance, when you listen to these guys and you know that they have this kind of retro occult melodic rock sound, it would be fair to just assume that they sound like Ghost or they're a derivative of Ghost. And while I can understand some comparisons, I feel like these guys kind of add to that. I feel like their music, it sounds much more like a group effort compared to a Ghost who, is kind of just Tobias Forge doing his thing. This feels a lot more like a band, an ensemble band essentially, where it's not just one guy leading the way. And,
right.
And because of that, I feel like their sound has a lot more going on. Getting into the album, Into the Night has this really sing-along-y, poppy chorus. Besmirch is a little heavier, the second track. Sounds kind of like an 80s, like old 80s thrash or speed metal song in some ways. Then you have 1000 Eyes, which is very synth pop and super catchy. Then after that, you have Wiccophobia, which is the one song on YouTube that they actually have a lyric video to. It sounds like a Danzig song with a higher pitched lead singer going into a chorus that sounds like Alice in Chains. Like, there's just so much to enjoy about this album. Standout tracks, we have Into the Night, Besmirched, 1000 Eyes, Wiccophobia, Poison Apple, Revivified. But just check out the whole thing, because there's something there for everyone. The song I picked in this case is Into the Night. Just really cool song.
Yeah, these guys have a great sound. Really excited to get a chance to listen to the whole album. I've listened to about the first half, and what I've heard is really excellent. We are going to check out the opening track to the new release from Vexing Hex, Solve et Coagula. This is Into the Night. So we're going to check that out now here on the Nerdcast Empire.
See the spell, raise the knife, plunge you down, take your life. Then take my hand and we'll step into the night. Black out what was bright. Extinguish the sun up in the sky, let it dry. Into the night, darkness is your light. The time has come for you to die. Step into the night.
Yeah, just a wild sound for sure that is so outside of the box. And But again, I feel like they've committed to it and they absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole album, there's variants in the songs. That they don't all sound the same, but they all sound different from what you're used to hearing. I got to call out Poison Apple because there are lyrics in it that reference Super Mario Brothers. Something to the effect of, like, your princess is in another castle. Like, I heard that. I'm like, wait, what? Just really cool stuff, and definitely a band worth checking out.
Yeah, 2 really good picks this week. I had Floating Worlds with Skywatcher, and the last one was Vexing Hex with Solved at Coagula. 2 very unique bands with awesome releases from June the 21st. I have 2 bands that are definitely outside of what I typically pick as well this week, which I think has been a lot of fun. The first one is a band formed in 2005 in Kristianstad, Sweden. The band is called Portrait, and the new album is called The Host. This is a band that very clearly has influences from King Diamond and Merciful Fate. I think that is very obvious when you listen to this, but at the same time, they don't sound like a tribute act. They don't sound like a cover band. They are using it as an influence, but they really are making the sound their own, which is something that I really enjoy when listening to this. It's very dark, very heavy sound, kind of some interesting themes in their music that are very dark, but it fits with the vocal style and the music. Even some thrash in there as well, but I really kind of enjoyed just a different, heavier sound than I typically look for in music on these lists. Angry Metal Guy reviewed it. Obviously, he talked about the King Diamond Merciful Fate worship from their band. But it's a long album. This may be one of the longest albums we've ever profiled. Typically, you're looking at 8 to 10 songs, 40 to 50 minutes. This is 14 tracks and 75 minutes of music, but it's great beginning to end. Sometimes you worry as a band, especially in the modern day, where it's not really necessary to load up an album, that maybe when you go to that many tracks, you're watering it down or you're putting stuff on there that doesn't need to be there. I don't feel like these guys did that. I feel like they just have a very strong sound from beginning to end on this album, and that, to me, makes this one of the more impressive releases of the year because they were able to just release such a high-quality album that is so long and has so many tracks. But I think people are really going to dig this, especially if you're into bands like King Diamond, Merciful Fate. I think you're going to find something here you really enjoy. Standout tracks to me, The Sacrament, Die in My Heart, and the track we're going to play a clip of, The Blood Covenant. Again, just a really great sound, really dark sound, heavy stuff with some really kind of high-pitched vocals, which really kind of tie the whole thing together. So we're going to check that out, and we're going to check out The Blood Covenant, the second track after the very short intro track. This is track number 2, and it really kind of hits hard right out of the gate. This is Portrait with The Host, and this is the second track off of that album. As I mentioned, this is The Blood Covenant, so let's check that out now here on the Nerdcast Empire. Yeah, I mean, I really kind of felt like this could have been a follow-up of a song like The Invisible Guest or something. But it's just so good. They did it so well. And again, feels very much influence, not cover. They're clearly not ripping off that style. They're taking it, making it something that's their own. And because of that, I think this is a really great release. And again, one of the longest releases we've had this year. Mike, your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, my first thought was both their band name Portrait and the album The Host just sound like they should be King Diamond or Merciful Fate album titles. I mean, I know King Diamond did have Fatal Portrait, so that might be where I'm getting that. Yeah, I love that there's clearly that influence, but it's like they said, okay, what all can we add to that just to bring more to the sound? Because, I mean, there's probably like 5 different vocal styles getting mixed in there. It's not just the falsetto. It's not just the more guttural sounds. They're all over the place. Some of it kind of sounds like Nevermore. You hear some like Warrell Dane in there, which is really cool. And musically, there's a lot more going on than like certainly the old Merciful Fate stuff. Like this is definitely a more modern metal sound with the occasional guitar tones that harken back to like King Diamond. But yeah, I just way to take your inspirations and really add to it. I thought this was really cool.
Yeah, really great stuff. Definitely check those guys out. Portrait with their new release, The Host, definitely worth checking out. For the final band, this is kind of going in a completely different direction than what that was. We are coming back to the United States. In fact, we're headed to Los Angeles, California, for a band called the Mercury Riots and their latest release, In Solstice. This was a band that was formed in early 2021. A bunch of members of different popular LA scene bands like Warner Drive, The Brave Ones, Bullets and Octane, coming together to put this band together. A quartet, Justin Walker on lead vocals, Felipe Rodrigo on guitars, Fede Delfino on bass, and Johnny Udell on drums. But this is a band that has taken so many influences, whether it's sleaze rock or blues rock or southern rock, and kind of put them all together into this band. And they jumped out at me with the track that you had on your playlist this week because I just thought, man, this feels like the spiritual successor to the Fabulous Thunderbirds. It's very southern rock, but done in a modern style that it feels like modern LA rock that we're getting out of this band. And you hope that when you put the album on that it's going to kind of confirm that, because there were a couple where it's like the one track's like, okay, and then you get in the album, it's like, little, doesn't, but these guys really carried it all the way through the album, which made me really happy because I definitely want to hear more from these guys. Standout tracks, Make It, Sweet Melody, and the song we're going to hear a clip of is Be Yours, the second track on the album. But definitely, as you'll hear from the clip, I think something that people are going to really feel the influences that this band has kind of squashed together to make this sound and really make it their own. So we're going to check out a clip from these guys now. Again, this is Be Yours off of the album In Solstice from the Mercury Roots. Or Mercury Riots. It'd be easier. Try that again.
The font on the album cover is pretty wild.
The Mercury Riots from their album In Solstice. The track is Be Yours, so let's check that out now here on the Nerdcast Empire. Kind of want to play a little bit of that second line because you definitely got like the Fabulous Thunderbirds vibe there. But the chorus of that song almost felt a little bit like The Cult. Definitely heard some influence there. But then you hear that little kind of guitar part there, just almost felt like a little bit of funk kind of influence as
almost
well.
Almost Aerosmithy in a way, too.
Yes, like I definitely hear the Aerosmith influence as well. But just a fun album. I just think people are going to listen to this and they're going to just hear some just fun rock and roll music that, again, this band has taken a lot of different influences and has made it into something that is really awesome. The Mercury Riots, really, really great stuff. Mike, your thoughts on this one?
I think sometimes it's about what they don't add to their sound that matters. And I think with a lot of these kind of more retro rock inspired bands, they always bring in the keyboards or synths to some degree. And this band doesn't really seem to do that. Like, they seem just a straight up hard rock band. It's like you think about all the things that influence them, and they kind of just smash it into this sound that just rocks. And I think there's definitely a place for more of that.
Absolutely. And I think we found a couple groups lately that have kind of played younger artists that are playing retro style music, but doing it in a way that is, I don't want to say transformative, but you feel like you're taking it, bringing it to the modern era, but it is, at the core of it, hard rock music. It's not something weird. It's not, because we do listen to a lot of interesting music on this podcast, a lot of stuff that's progressive, a lot of stuff that is, like you said, synth-driven, especially when you start getting into throwback music. But this band didn't do any of that stuff. It's just straight-ahead hard rock, and this feels like a band that really could take off if they get the right opportunity. Obviously, they're doing well, having albums, but it just feels like this is a band that needs to be getting more attention because their sound is just so good.
Yeah, and I wonder what the vehicle is for that. I just, could we have some sort of festival that essentially has enough star power that when you bring in all these younger acts, there's still a sizable audience for it without kind of muddying the waters with some things that maybe aren't necessarily rock?
It's a great question. I would love to attend that festival if it existed anywhere. But definitely check those guys out. Really, really fun stuff. The Mercury Riots in Solstice, the second pick this week for me. If you're listening on the podcast version of this podcast, we're going to step aside. When we come back, we're going to go into the vault where Mike and I will bring you a classic album you need to check out. We'll do that on the other side of this time out here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, live on Twitch as we are each and every Sunday, a little bit earlier this week because of the NXT Premium Live event coming up shortly. Don't forget to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can also check out our VODs either on YouTube or here on Twitch. You can, in most cases, hear all the music on YouTube or Twitch that we play live during these podcasts. In most cases, they get through and you can listen to them. We encourage you to be here live because that's the one place that you can guarantee you're going to get to hear the music. And follow us when you get here. Obviously, we were very grateful for our 23 followers so far as of the time I'm saying that. And thankful to everybody who's here. Of course, Chris joining us in the chat. Again, holding down the chat for us as always. We really appreciate it. We're continuing to try to grow this thing, and we can only do that as we continue to expand our audience. So thank you to everybody who joins us for this. Next podcast will be coming up Thursday night. It'll be another Anime Thursdays. Got some interesting stories to talk about on Thursday. It's going to be more of a news headline type show this Thursday, so check that out. 7 o'clock Eastern Time Thursday night here on the Nerdcast Empire. And then 1 week from tonight, we'll be back at our normal time, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, for another episode of Music Weekly. We're on to June 28th, the music next week, so looking forward to seeing what the playlist has in store for us next week. We'll check that out here on the Nerdcast Empire. Time to go into the vault, where each week we bring you a classic album you need to check out. Of course, Mike is continuing through the alphabet. I'm continuing through the years. Mike, we're rolling along through the alphabet. Believe it or not, we are up to the letter T this week. And a lot of great choices for T, but you've picked not only a really good band, but a really good album. Tell us what you got this week.
Yeah, we are nearing the home stretch of the alphabet. Kind of exciting. But yeah, for the letter T, there were certainly some options. I think the one I went with is definitely one of the more influential albums for me as far as the music I've been into for quite a while. This is a band that I kind of got into before this album. They had 3 albums before this. The second one's kind of considered one of their best, and then the third one came out, which kind of saw a bit of a departure for them and got some criticism for that. I thought this was more of a return to form, much more like that second album. With all that being said, my choice for the vault this week is the 4th album from the Florida-based heavy metal, metalcore, progressive metal band Trivium, and the album from 2008 is called Shogun.
Yeah, Trivium is great. This is certainly an album I've heard because I've heard you listen to it quite a bit, and I kind of let you talk about it, but there's a funny note on their Wikipedia page about this album that I just kind of a sign of the times that doesn't is not the same as it is nowadays. But I kind of want to get your thoughts on this first.
Yeah, so this album is the follow-up to 2006's The Crusade, which I did enjoy, but when it came out, it was kind of criticized because they kind of abandoned the growling vocals. They went full clean vocals with Matt Heafy. In a lot of ways, it was accused of sounding too much like Metallica. And there were publications that were kind of comparing them. Hey, is this the next Metallica? Which is such a horrible thing to do to a band.
Yeah.
Like, no one deserves to have to live up to that. And I think that was pretty rough on them. The album before that, Ascendancy, tremendous album, has some really great songs on it. And I kind of thought that was just going to be their sound forever. But they had released The Crusade, which was certainly more accessible and had some really cool songs, but you were kind of hoping that next album might kind of veer them back in the direction they ended up going, which it did, thankfully. Trivium's one of my favorite, I want to say modern bands, but they're not modern. They're modern to me as far as bands that have been prominent in the past 20 years. Definitely one of my favorites. Great blend of the harsh vocals, clean vocals, really awesome guitar work, and really cool melodies. For an album like this, some of the standout tracks, which I almost have to classify it as like standout tracks and then tracks that are my favorite tracks of all time, because I think it almost bears that next level of connotation. But Kirste Goemon's a tremendous opening track. Down from the Sky, Into the Mouth of Hell We March, Throes of Perdition, The Calamity of Prometheus and the Crucifix, and Shogun, the title track. Really long track, but outstanding. Throes of Perdition, and Kirste Goemon are probably three of my favorite songs of all time. Just the build-up to the chorus of Kirste Goemon is just legendary to me, and something that everyone needs to listen to. And Shogun, just for a longer song, just has such a really cool structure to it. And the chorus is really long, but just has this melody that gets stuck in your head. It's an amazing album. What can I say? The limited edition also has a really cool cover of the Iron Maiden song Iron Maiden off of their initial album Iron Maiden by Iron Maiden. I was trying to think of the best way to explain that by saying Iron Maiden as many times as possible.
Right.
I kind of feel like this was like their sweet spot as far as their albums go. Really loved Ascendancy. The Crusade was good. Then you had this one and you had In Waves, both just tremendous albums. I could have picked either one of those or any of those, to be totally honest, but I went this direction. It's also kind of funny because I feel like I look back fondly at video games around that same era and the music that was used in video games. And from this album, you have Into the Mouth of Hell We March was featured on Madden 2009. Down from the Sky was in WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2010. Just a great era of soundtrack music and video games.
Yeah, no question about that. I just had to crack up because the note on release and promotion of this album is like, on June 16, 2008, Trivium posted a bulletin on their MySpace profile titled New Album Update with an embedded YouTube video implying the album would be released on September the 30th, 2008 by Roadrunner. It's just funny because you have that dichotomy. It's like MySpace, but they had a YouTube video, and they mentioned that some of the tracks would be available on iTunes, so kind of feels like the early stages of that as well, that it was just like, clearly they were still using MySpace, but they were also moving into what would become these technology beasts that we still use today. And YouTube, iTunes has kind of gone away with like Apple Music now kind of taking that space, but it's still sort of there. Obviously, YouTube, I don't know if it'll ever die unless they kill it off themselves with all these unskippable ads and everything else. But
that's what it would take. I do still believe that at its peak, MySpace was vastly superior to Facebook. I think as far as combining social media with basically your own website.
Yeah.
I think there's so many features that Facebook really should have implemented from that and never did.
I think from a music standpoint, it was unquestionably superior because there was your favorite music you could post on there. Songs would pop up when you would open the page. Like,
I remember I had an embedded video of the Dragon Quest opening from the old 80s anime. I don't know why, but I did, and it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I feel like I never took as much advantage of MySpace as I probably should have, and it's kind of sad because it feels like it went away so quickly. I mean, obviously, I think it existed longer than it really, people really remember because it kind of faded out. But
When it faded out hard.
It did.
It wasn't just like a slow death. It was just like, oh, no one's there anymore. Okay, cool.
it just kind of goes hand in hand with us talking a couple weeks ago about that Winamp Raspberry Pi thing.
Yeah.
It's like those are like the things that were my era of getting into music.
I got recommended this video on YouTube. It was kind of all over the board, but it was basically talking about how so many things nowadays, from like an aesthetic standpoint, are just boring.
Yeah.
And they go from like fast food restaurants, how so much of the architecture and design of the buildings is just so flat and you think of the old Taco Bell style compared to what it is now, where it looks more corporate maybe. Soft drinks, they mentioned the can design of Pepsi and Coca-Cola, how like now they look so just kind of drab and boring. But they also went into websites and basically comparing things like MySpace to the very boring, sterile, clean-looking Facebook. And it just... Obviously, the video was lamenting all of this, but you don't even think about some of them, and you're like, man, things do really just seem very plain nowadays.
Feels like the technology version of Nothing But Flowers from
Exactly. I think that is totally a fair comparison.
Like, give me back my peaceful oasis, instead of this parking lot that's very boring. So
it's a great song.
It is. That's one of the all-time best songs for sure. But really great pick from the vault this week. Trivium is a band everybody should check out if you're into metal music, and this is certainly a great entry point. Shogun from 2008. As always, it's getting harder and harder each and every week as we're going through the years to pick albums because there are so many great albums. This week we're talking 1985. I know you're going to pull up a whole list of albums that could have qualified this week, but I ended up kind of settling between. There were 2 or 3 different albums I was looking at, and of course I listed them in our Twitch channel, and I did not copy them in my document, so we'll pull up Twitch real quick and talk about some of the honorable mentions for this week. And for some reason I cannot find that post, but okay, so one of the other ones that was an honorable mention to me was the Night Ranger album, Seven Wishes. I think this is a really great album. It's not quite their greatest hits, but there's a lot of great stuff on there, like 4 in the Morning, Sentimental Street, which is a great song, Goodbye, which is the closing track. It's really good stuff from those guys. In the end, it was hard to top Phil Collins' No Jacket Required. Maybe one of his best albums of all time. Just a great album beginning to end. There's just, obviously people will know the hits, but I think some of the other songs on there are really, really good too that didn't necessarily catch hits. Starting off on side 1, you start off with Susudio, then Only You and I Know, Only You Know and I Know. Long, Long Way to Go, I Don't Want to Know, and then closing out One More Night, kind of a slower song to end side 1. And then you come right out in side 2, one of my favorite Phil Collins songs, actually 2 of my favorite Phil Collins songs on this side, Don't Lose My Number. That's a classic.
Yeah.
Then, of course, you have Who Said I Would, Doesn't Anybody Stay Together Anymore, Inside Out, and then it closes with maybe my all-time favorite Phil Collins song, Take Me Home. Just a classic song, classic video. If you haven't seen it, you definitely should check it out. If you get the deluxe edition from 2016, you also get the bonus of a live version of Easy Lover, recorded in 1997. Because, of course, Easy Lover, as we talked about last week on the podcast, was on Phil Bailey's album from 1984, could have very easily been on this album as well, which would have just made this a ridiculous album. But in the end, they have added it to the deluxe edition live version of Easy Lover, which is one of my all-time favorite songs. Poor Chris, he probably taken 7 days to get Easy Lover out of his head, but nope, it is back. But this album, of course, did very, very well. Sold over 12 million copies, certified diamond status, ended up in the top 10 of the Billboard charts. He actually won the Grammy for Album of the Year with this album. So, again, just a great song. The hits are huge, but really this is a great album beginning to end. Phil Collins going to be cursing the dreams of Chris, but I'm a huge Phil Collins fan, huge Genesis fan. He actually brought in Peter Gabriel to do some backing vocals on this along with Sting. So it's a great album. This is a great time to kind of look at both what Genesis was doing and then obviously Phil Collins and his solo stuff. But definitely check out No Jacket Required, my vault pick for 1985. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. When I think of how I listen to music, I was raised in the CD era, and now we've moved on beyond that. So I don't really think of music in terms of side A, side B, but it's kind of interesting looking at this album where you have like the first track on each side, you have Sussudio and Don't Lose My Number, these like super 80s upbeat poppy songs. And then the end of each side, you have One More Night and Take Me Home. It's just like they just end on such kind of a low-key down note. Yeah. It's kind of interesting how they do that. It's something I would never have really thought about beforehand.
Well, it's interesting because it's mentioned in the Wikipedia article that his previous album, solo album, was kind of a little more serious because he'd been going through, I think, a divorce, and it was heavier. So he wanted to come back with this album and make things that were upbeat and there would be kind of that vibrant style. And I really feel like he kind of nailed that with this album. And just again, I love Phil Collins. His hits are his greatest hits. Maybe one of my favorite greatest hits albums. And again, great solo stuff, but also great stuff with Genesis as well. And this kind of was that sweet spot where he was really churning out the hits for sure.
You could have gone so many other directions with this.
100%.
I'm still kind of in the process of scanning here because there's a lot out there, which is not surprising being 1985 and all.
Right.
Let's see. Start out, we have Bon Jovi, 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit. That's, classic album. We
Definitely.
have Megadeth's Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, their debut, which was tremendous.
And it's one of those things, I looked at that, but I thought there's probably another Megadeth album that I will probably pick along the way. Yeah. So it's like, and again, that is a great album. But it's like, sometimes when I look through these years, I see a band, and it's like, okay, this is good. But like, if I want to pick this one in 2 or 3 years when it comes up, like I don't want to pick, come back and have to pick 2 or 3 of the same band or artist in a row. So yeah, sure. I definitely considered Megadeth for sure.
We have Rat, Invasion of Your Privacy.
That was definitely up there on the top of the list.
You're in Love, Lay It Down, Never Use Love, Between the Eyes.
Great stuff.
Really good album.
Yep.
We have Motley Crue's Theater of Pain.
Yeah.
Also another great album. City Boy Blues, Smoking in the Boys' Room, Louder Than Hell, Home Sweet Home.
Yeah.
We have Loverboy, Loving Every Minute of It.
I saw that. I looked at it and it's like, okay, they don't have quite as many hits on those ones.
No, they really don't, but it's Loverboy.
Sure.
Kiss's Asylum.
Yeah. Did see that one. Funny, the Kiss and Motley Crue, we were talking about them earlier in our news section, and a couple of big albums from them in 1985.
One that I honestly need to listen to more of, the album Thunder in the East by the band Loudness.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Like, that's probably one that I do need to listen to the whole album.
Like, if you've not seen the video to Crazy Nights, you need to do that by Loudness.
Rock and Roll Crazy Nights. You are the I don't know, the hero tonight? Yeah, that's what I thought it was. MZA, which means nothing at all. It was just 3 letters that sounded cool for those guys to chant. But legends, Japanese music legends, rock and roll legends.
Going back to my first pick this week, Floating Worlds. If there's one album I'd like to see them look into for maybe covering, it would be another classic 1985 album, Rhythm of the Night by DeBarge.
I saw that. I didn't know what else DeBarge did.
Neither, actually.
But Rhythm of the Night is one of my, if I had to come up with a list of my favorite 80s pop songs, that one's probably in the top 5.
That's a great one. There's no question about it. Let's see here. I caught up to what I'd already pulled. Let's see what else we have. Mike and the Mechanics.
I looked at that. considered that. I think they're another one that could show up in a year or two with another release of theirs.
Very talented for sure.
No question.
What do we have on that one? I don't know their albums very well. We got The Cult with their album Love, which has She Sells Sanctuary on it.
Okay.
That being the big hit on that one, I think.
Yeah. That's another thing. You start going through some of these albums, and some of them are like, okay, there's a couple of hits on there, but it's like the rest of the album is kind of like, eh. Like,
I mean, we could have picked this band for their debut, and it was a missed opportunity, but we now have Wasp, The Last Command, came out in 85. Great album. Let's see. Ooh, Artists United Against Apartheid.
yeah, I saw that. We Are the World.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in 1985, so definitely worth checking out.
Anthrax, Spreading the Disease.
Yeah.
Classic album. We got Madhouse, obviously, AIR, Learn Justice, Medusa. Great song.
Yeah.
Let's see.
A lot of great stuff. Again, these years are just, there's so much.
It's amazing, like, that Butthole Surfers were around back then.
Yeah, that's not the first album I've seen from them. I'm pretty sure I saw one a couple of years prior. Those guys have been around a long time.
Let's see.
They didn't really hit till the 90s,
Yeah.
you know, as far as like mainstream success.
And Aerosmith done with Mirrors. Not bad.
Yeah.
UFO, Misdemeanor.
Yeah, I did not pick UFO. Eddie Trunk will be disappointed, I'm sure.
He's always disappointed about something.
He sure is. Although as much as we talk about AI and Blasted, I think he'll be pleased with that.
That's very true.
That it all balances out. Shout out to Eddie Trunk.
But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of good stuff in '85.
There was, and I'm sure as we get to 1986 next week, that will certainly continue to increase as we're just getting into more rock and metal releases each and every year as we go through each and every week in this vault. So really good stuff. Definitely check out Phil Collins or any of those other albums from 1985. Some really great music there. And that is going to wrap things up for this week's edition of the Nerdcast Empire and Music Weekly, which... always a great time. Great music this week from June the 21st. Definitely check that out. Support these bands, as we say each and every week. If you hear something you like, give the album a listen. If you like what you hear, buy the album, buy the merch, go see them in concert, because that's how these bands thrive and survive. And we're certainly really happy that we can find these guys and hopefully get a chance eventually to see some of these bands live as they come through the Ohio Valley area. So... that's going to wrap things up for this week's edition of Music Weekly. Don't forget, we'll be back Thursday night, 7 o'clock Eastern for Anime Thursdays. We're going to be talking news headlines on Thursday, so join us for that. And then 1 week from tonight, we'll be back with another edition of Music Weekly. It'll be our 22nd edition of Music Weekly next week, as we'll be looking at the music from June the 28th. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support. Big thanks to everybody who has chatted, who has followed, who has watched the VOD, whatever it may be. Thank you so much. And if you're watching the VOD right now and you haven't followed us, click that heart, give us a follow. We really appreciate it. Our first goal is to get to 50 followers. We'd really appreciate your support. We appreciate everybody who has supported us up to this point. That's going to wrap things up. We'll be back to do it all again on Thursday with Anime Thursdays, and again next week for Music Weekly. For Mike, for Chris, for the entire crew, for everybody who joined us this week, I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.